In the comments on my video talking about the performance improvements that seem to show up on the 1.3 patch for Wuchang Fallen Feathers, a lot of people are saying it's actually just faking the internal rendering resolution. There was no actual performance improvement. They're just lying to you about the rendering resolution now as like a placebo effect, and you can no longer run the game at native resolution despite setting the resolution scaling to 100%. Now that's certainly interesting, and backing up that claim is this kind of vague statement in the patch notes. So it says super sampling resolution limits have been adjusted on select GPU models, so maybe not all, to prevent unintended performance degradation. So super sampling resolution would generally be, super sampling is things like DLSS, FSR, that kind of a thing. The resolution limits have been adjusted, but when I read the patch notes, I just assumed that meant like maybe some GPUs don't let you go to certain resolutions now, but it would still tell you that in the menu. But maybe it's telling you something in the menu that's different than what's actually happening. Let's investigate. And again, select GPU models. So I picked a relatively modest GPU so where it might be doing this. So I've plugged in an RTX 3060. Now, the way we're also going to be able to test this is I have a PC that has not yet updated the game from the launch version. So I've installed the RTX 3060 into that system. Also, I did want to just look at my side-by-side footage a little more closely to see if anything jumped out at me as, are they hiding the resolution scaling? And there are certainly moments in that benchmark run, this is taken from this launch patch versus patch 1.3, where I feel like the right-hand side is looking more pixelated than the left-hand side, but the game just kind of looks very pixelated a lot. So honestly, neither side looks super amazing. Now, granted, this is zoomed in quite a bit here to try to look for it, but anyway, so I'm certainly suspicious. Now, we're going to kind of confirm this live. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to track some performance numbers on the launch version. Then I'm going to update the game. We're going to track the performance numbers there and see if we can see anything potentially fishy going on here. So let's actually switch over to my benchmarking PC, which I'm controlling live. Again, this is an RTX 3060, but in an otherwise highest of the high-end system, so we're just looking at GPU-limited performance since we're looking at resolution scaling, which primarily affects the GPU. This is currently set to, we're at 1440p resolution. We're at ultra graphics settings, and I've currently set it to TSR 100% resolution. And we can see here that the performance number we're getting is 29 FPS. So I'm going to go ahead and type that into my spreadsheet. So we'll have a record of things as we go. Now, we're going to go ahead and lower the internal rendering resolution. And first of all, check that we can do that. Now, I want to be clear. Right now, we are on the launch version of the game. We're not looking at the patched version. We're going to check if the resolution scaling behavior changes with the patched version, and maybe that is where some of the performance was coming from dirty lies and placebo effects. But again, let's find out. So TSR at 67%, this would normally align with the quality settings. By the way, I had some people just also commenting, this is a bit of a side note, that this game, they're like, how do I select FSR, DLSS quality, or balanced, or performance? This game doesn't have those. True, they use just a resolution slider rather than those named presets, which is why it's even more nefarious if they are actually lying about what these percentages are. Anyway, so at 67%, performance does increase. Looks like we're up to about 45 FPS here. And I'll go ahead and note that in my table. So we are getting a noticeable performance gain from 100% TSR to dropping it down to the quality setting, 67%, on the launch version of the game. Let's go ahead and, come on. Why is this jumping over there? Okay, there we go. Let's also check out 59%, which would normally be what we would call the balanced mode for most of the upscalers. Looks like performance jumps to 50 FPS, so we're continuing to scale performance along with resolution as you would expect. Again, this is the launch behavior of the game. And let's go ahead and drop it down to 50%. And we'll note that once again, we have a performance increase. Give it a second to settle in. Looks like we're hitting 58 frames per second there. So just short of 60 FPS in this particular scene. Now let's go ahead and check how that behavior works with the other upscalers. So let's jump to let's jump back to 100% resolution, and now let's check out the behavior of DLSS. So DLSS, when set to 100% resolution scaling, should be effectively DLAA. In other words, and notice that actually down in the menu here, it does say current level is DLAA when we set it to 100%. DLAA is meaning we're not upscaling, this is native resolution, but using the DLSS algorithm as a high quality anti-aliasing. Performance is at 28, which is pretty much the same performance as we were getting with TSR. It's 1 FPS lower. TSR was hitting 29. So they have a similar performance cost, it looks like, when running at 100% resolution scaling. We'll now drop down to 67%, which should be effectively the quality level. And notice that down here it does say current level quality right there. We're now hitting 43 FPS, so I'll go ahead and note that. TSR results were at 45, so this is pretty similar overall performance. It's DLSS is just slightly heavier, although that just went down to 43 if I sat there long enough. Well, you know what, not the end of the world. We're just looking for rough numbers anyway, because what we want to see is if it's different behavior when we do, sorry if you hear my kids yelling upstairs, they've got friends coming over to play. Anyway, 59 FPS, we want to see if it's different behavior on the new patch. So 59 FPS, notice it does now say DLSS balanced down here. So we're effectively on DLSS balanced now. It looks like we're at 48 FPS when I first switch it over, so I'll note that in our notes. And then we will go ahead and go down to 50%, which is what is normally called performance mode upscaling. So performance mode, 50%. Give it a second to kick in. We've got 54 FPS. So again, everything seems to be scaling as it should, and all the performance numbers are somewhat in line with TSR, just a little bit lower. Let's go ahead and also check the FSR behavior and check that everything's behaving the way it should on the launch version of the game with this. Then we'll jump into the patched version, and away we go. So FSR at 100% is hitting 28 FPS. That is the same as what we were getting with DLSS. Kind of bounces between 28 and 29. 29 is what we got with TSR. So all of these seem to be giving roughly the same performance within an FPS or so at what they're all calling 100% rendering resolution. So now let's drop down to 67%, which would be the quality mode. And it looks like we're hitting about 45 FPS, so about the same performance as we got with DLSS at the same internal rendering resolution. And then we're now going to drop down to 59%. So 59%. We are up to 50 FPS, so slightly faster than what we were getting from DLSS at those numbers. I think DLSS was at 48 when I checked my notes, but still very similar ballpark. And then we'll go down to performance mode at 50%. Wait, I think I actually did 49, let's be fair. Okay, let's go to 50%. And it looks like we're hitting 58 FPS, so a little bit better than what we saw with DLSS and the same as what we saw with TSR. I'm now going to update the game to its latest patch, and we'll check if behavior has changed. Note that as I download the patch, it looks like they just released yet another update to patch 1.4. This says optimizing performance issues for certain device models. So it's a little unclear what that is, but just to be clear, we're now onto the latest 1.4 patch. Instead of the 1.3 patch, so interesting, but let's go ahead and check out the latest version. All right, I'm now in patch 1.4, and I'm setting TSR to 100%, and check it out, 37 FPS. Now, this is interesting because that is certainly better performance than what we saw on the launch version of the game, which seems like there's performance increases, right? But if that's really just that they're running at a lower internal rendering resolution, it's not really an optimization patch, it's just lying to you about the FPS. So we're definitely seeing better performance, but let's check what happens at the other scalars and see if we notice anything interesting. So 67%, we're hitting 47 FPS. Which is very similar to what we got in the launch version of the game, which is interesting. And now let's check out the other internal resolution settings we tested before on the launch version of the game. So we're testing out 59%. So I'm now seeing 52 FPS. The launch version of the game was 50. I'm tracking all of this in a spreadsheet over here so we can reference it later. So that's where we're at so far. And then now let's go down to the 50% resolution scaling, so like performance mode TSR, and see what we see. So it looks like now I'm getting 60 FPS on that. So, and at the launch version was at 58. So I'm seeing slightly higher performance, but this is very interesting. Let's look at this for a second. This is really suspicious. Look. When we set it to 100% resolution scaling at launch, we went from 29 FPS to 37. That is a massive percentage performance increase. Whereas when we set them both to 67, there's a 2 FPS increase between patches. When we set them both to 59, there's a 2 FPS increase between patches. Both set to 50%, a 2 FPS increase between patches, meaning it seems like there was only a small performance improvement from the patch, but if you try to set the game to native resolution, it seems like a massive performance increase, which means that it's very, very likely that they are just not letting you run at native rendering resolution. Really, really suspicious here. Anyway, let's go ahead and keep going. So I do want to check out, so we'll go back to 100% resolution scaling. Let's check out DLSS next. That, first of all, switching to DLSS brought it down to 66, which is already kind of confusing. Now I'm going to slide it up to 100% though, and performance is at 45. Now 45 is certainly interesting because that is exactly what the pre-patch version gave us at DLSS quality. I just realized I may not have shown you my sliding over the, I'm trying to record all of this live and I have to switch between various inputs here. So just to be clear, let me show this to you. So I did just set this to DLSS 100%. And here we're getting, like I said, 45 FPS. And now if I switch back to my spreadsheet, notice that 45 FPS is now 100% resolution scaling according to the game, but it's matching exactly to the DLSS quality performance we had at launch. That is very suspicious. Notice it still says here that the current level is DLAA. Geez, I'm on the wrong thing again. Here it's still calling this DLAA as if you are running at 100%, and this is still saying 100% resolution scaling. So yeah, very, very suspicious here. Let's go down to 67%, and now it does say that the current level is at quality. And notice that performance has gone completely unchanged. It's still at 45 FPS. Oh my goodness. Yeah, it seems like it just does not let you actually go above DLSS quality on this GPU at least. That is absolutely confirmed right there. That is, wow. Okay. Now 59%, let's go ahead and see what we're getting. But now I think I know what to expect is exactly the same as we had pre-patch. So 50 FPS. Looks like pre-patch we were at 48, so essentially the same. A second, type that in wrong on my spreadsheet. Okay, 50 FPS. And then let's go down to the 50% internal rendering resolution and see where that gets us. So 50% internal rendering is getting us now 56 FPS, and on the on the launch version, we were at 54. So very, very similar performance there overall. So check this out. This is where we're at with our spreadsheet. So looking at DLSS, pre-patch, launch version, 28 FPS at native, 45 FPS now, but 45 FPS was DLSS quality at launch, and that's exactly what we got with the current patch. So it's certainly looking like there wasn't actually much performance improvement, if at all. They just lie to you about the internal resolution now. Now on DLSS balanced, we gained 2 FPS, and DLSS performance, we gained 2 FPS. So maybe there is some additional performance improvement here, but not a whole lot, if any. So the last thing we want to check is if they're doing the same thing to us using our FSR results. So FSR at 100%. Let's see. So FSR at 100%, we are at 39 FPS. On the launch version of the game, we were at 28 FPS. So it seems suspicious that it's doing the same thing to us here as it was there. Let's with our DLSS and and whatnot. So it seems like all of them have kind of done this. So 67% is now up to 47. And pre-patch was 45. So again, 2 FPS faster, it's looking like. And then let's go down to 59, I mean. 59 is getting us up to 53 FPS. Pre-patch was 50. And then let's go down one last settings check. Let's go down to 50%. And 50% is now hitting 60 FPS. Pre-patch was hitting 58. Okay, very, very interesting. And why is my keyboard not working? Just one second. There, typing in my spreadsheet. All right, so let's switch over to my spreadsheet. So what we're seeing here is that, interestingly, it seems like they have just lied to us about the resolution scaling. So again, we're only seeing these massive performance jumps when you're setting it to 100% rendering resolution. If we set them all to 67%, we're seeing a 2 FPS improvement on TSR, a 2 FPS improvement with FSR, and exactly the same performance using DLSS. Set them to 59%, which is effectively the balanced mode. TSR was 50 FPS, went up to 52, so 2 FPS improvement. FSR went from 50 to 53, so a 3 FPS improvement. And DLSS went from 48 to 50, so 2 FPS improvement. So there is a tiny bit of improvement on offer, it looks like, with the patch version, but not a lot. And then performance mode went from 58 to 60, 2 FPS again, 58 to 60 with FSR and TSR, and then 54 to 56 using DLSS. So as far as I can tell, they are indeed now, at least on some GPUs, this is the RTX 3060, lying to you about the internal rendering resolution of the game, and the game no longer allows you to play at a native rendering resolution. That is not something I'm happy with. So, geez, like, I understand wanting people to use upscaling to have better performance, and maybe that's what the devs target, but I think that's what the graphics presets already do. Note that the graphic presets do actually use resolution scaling, and a person booting up the game, it defaults to having resolution scaling on. So the devs are already making it very clear that they expect people to use resolution scaling and are encouraging that, setting it in their presets and having that be the default behavior of the game. But I am absolutely not on board with a game not only not allowing you to run it at native rendering resolution, but effectively lying to you about it being at native rendering resolution. Because again, when I slide this, like when I'm using DLSS and I slide this to 100%, it says that we're now in DLAA mode, right? Like it is telling us that we're at native resolution, 100% rendering resolution using DLAA, when we very, very clearly are not. And I realized I was trying to show that in the graphics menu, but I had clicked the wrong button again on my inputs. So anyway, sorry guys, I'm in a little bit of a rush recording this because I have kids have friends coming over and I want to be involved in family stuff and all that, but I did want to check this out since my previous video made it seem like performance had increased. But it turns out they were just lying about the internal rendering resolution. So that's interesting stuff. Now, the last thing I'll note is that it seems like the way this performance numbers are coming along is that while DLSS seems to be locked to the quality mode, it seems like with TSR and FSR, the performance numbers aren't as cleanly lined up like they did with DLSS, where native, what it says is now native, is what used to be quality and there's no change. It's seeming like with FSR and TSR that we've kind of hit somewhere in between. So I'm guessing that they hit something probably more like an 80% internal rendering resolution or something like that, where maybe they were hoping that visually it would be less noticeable. But again, while in the side-by-sides between the launch version and the patch version, you know, it looked similar. Both were a little bit blurry, to be honest. Again, there's shots in motion where I think it's pretty clear that the right-hand side did indeed look more pixelated on close inspection. And so it is, the other thing that's really getting me about this isn't just that it's not telling you the truth about the rendering resolution. That's already bad. But the fact that somebody who has powerful enough hardware to run at native resolution literally can't now. It's literally just making the game look worse, although I haven't tested out super high-end hardware. So, maybe on more powerful GPUs, because they did say that this was only happening on apparently select GPU models. Now, this is all the time I have to investigate this today. I don't know if any of you guys have done your own investigations and could let me know in the comment section. But yeah, not super happy about lying about the resolution and calling it optimization. Hope all of you have an excellent day anyway.